So good morning again, and thank you for joining Cure Childhood Cancer for our web-based learning event for patient families affected by childhood cancer. Cure Childhood Cancer is a nonprofit organization dedicated to conquering childhood cancer through funding targeted research and supporting patients and their families. As a way to support families, Cure has launched a webinar series that will address the unique needs of families affected by childhood cancer. Please check out our website, www.curechildhoodcancer.org, regularly to learn more about upcoming web-based learning. My name is Karen McCarthy, Patient Family Services Manager at Cure Childhood Cancer, and I have the pleasure of being your host this morning. Before we begin, please note all incoming audio will be muted for the duration of the webinar. If you are using a computer camera, you can stop video of yourself by unclicking the camera icon next to your name in the participant panel. To remove the video box from your screen, hover your mouse over the down arrow on the left of the video box and click. If you are viewing from a computer, take this time to enlarge your viewing screen by clicking on the full screen button. You're welcome to ask questions during the webinar. However, questions will be answered at the conclusion of the webinar. To ask a question, type it into the Ask tab of your Q&A panel located on the bottom right of your screen. Lastly, to hide the panel taking up the right part of your screen, simply click on the Participants tab in the top right panel and it should collapse. For this webinar, Cure has partnered with Erin Pridgeon-Nicholas, licensed professional counselor and registered play therapist at the Summit Counseling Center. Erin's areas of specialty include working with children struggling with anxiety, depression, learning disabilities, divorce, grief, behavioral issues, and self-esteem. Cure is fortunate to have Erin and our Partners in Caring Counseling Program network of therapists, and we are also fortunate to have her here this morning. Erin, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Okay, good morning, everyone. Like Karen said, my name is Erin Pridgeon-Nicholas. I'm a registered play therapist, and as a registered play therapist, I work exclusively with children, primarily elementary and under, and their parents. And I always like to start by telling people a little bit about what play therapy is, because it'll help you to understand where I'm coming from with the information that I'm going to be sharing with you this morning. As a play therapist, I believe that a child's most natural and most comfortable language is play. Children at these young ages are still learning how to use words, and so using them accurately to express themselves is typically very challenging for them, whereas play is natural, it's comfortable, and it's more developmentally appropriate for them. So in my office, I have a playroom where children can come and process their emotions, sort and organize their experiences using play rather than just having to sit and talk about them. So the agenda for today is we're going to be talking about the siblings of the children who have been diagnosed with cancer, because they're sort of the ones that are still at home and not knowing what's going on. So the agenda for today is going to be talking about how to help them process major life changes. And we're going to start there because children process very differently than adults do. Then we're going to talk about some of the warning signs that will help you know if the siblings are struggling to cope with their brother or sister's cancer diagnosis. Then we're going to talk about ways to help them cope and some prevention ideas as well in case they aren't really, if you aren't seeing any signs of struggle just yet. So to get started, we're going to talk about how children process. So as I said, children process very differently than adults. Adults, when they experience a major life event or a major life change, they can sit with the thoughts, sit with the information, think them through, talk about them in longer periods of time, and usually can process things much faster than children can. Children, on the other hand, process things in bits and pieces over time. They might touch it for a second and then move away from it. They might be crying one minute and laughing hysterically at a joke the next. And it doesn't mean that they didn't hear you or that they didn't understand what was happening. This is just how children process. So, for example, if you have sat them down to tell them about why their older sibling is having to visit the doctor so often, or their younger sibling is having to visit the doctor so often, you may be concerned if they sit and within, a minute or two, they're up and talking about something else, or wanting to go play, or wanting to go get a snack. You may be wondering, did they really hear me? Did they really understand? And they did in that moment, but they can only take in so much at a time, and they will come back to it later. It may be 15 minutes, it may be a couple of days, it may be a week, but that is simply how children process, in little fits and bursts over time. Children also process through play, not through words. That's part of why I use play therapy as my primary modality in therapy with children. We talk plenty, but we are talking through play. We are talking through metaphor and analogies. So more often than not, your children will show you rather than tell you that they are struggling. It'll come out in their behavior and lots of other ways that we'll discuss here in a few minutes. But just know, most children aren't going to come to you and say, I'm having a hard time. That's just not how children work. And then lastly, children are typically more focused on how they are going to be affected by this, not necessarily how their sibling is dealing with it. So, and that's not them being self-centered or mean or bad or anything. That's just how children are. That's their developmental stage. They are typically more focused on, well, am I still going to get to go to my soccer games? Am I still going to have to do my homework, even though my brother or sister is in the hospital? They're more focused on how they're going to be affected because that's just children being children. If you have any questions throughout this, please don't hesitate to type in some questions that way, and we will get to all of them at the end as we can. So the next thing is the signs of struggle. How will you know that the children who are still home, how do you know that they are having a hard time coping with their brother or sister dealing with cancer? So the first thing to remember is this, that children don't tell us, they show us. So one of the primary signs that a child is struggling with any major life event is that you're going to start seeing changes in mood or behavior that are very out of character for your child. Maybe they're having more temper tantrums than usual. Maybe they are more distracted than usual. A lot of kids tend to withdraw and because they want to avoid being a further burden on their families. So you might see them kind of pull back, get quieter, be by themselves more often, whereas other kids are going to act out in order to get more attention. Because let's face it, when you've got a child who is battling an illness, they are going to be getting the most of your attention throughout the day because they need it. Other kids may act out in order to get more. And again, they're not doing it to be bad. They're children. They are trying to get a need met, and they're doing it in the only way they know how. So if you feel like you're seeing things that are very out of character for your child, that should be a warning sign for you. If your kid has kind of always been one of those kids that have a temper tantrum and things are about status quo, that's pretty normal. But if it's new, if it's out of character, and it's a distinctive shift, then you know, okay, there's something going on. They are having a harder time with this than they are letting on. Another big sign is grades dropping or having difficulty focusing at school. You'll often get notes from the teacher or emails from your child's teacher saying, hey, I'm noticing that little Susie is having a hard time paying attention in class. Or you'll be getting those grades home, the grade report, and you'll notice that they've gone from A's to B's or B's to C's, and it just doesn't seem quite right to you. And a lot of this comes from the fact that they do process things in little bits and pieces. And so they may be sitting in school. They may see the color purple, and oh, that's little Susie's favorite color. And therefore, they start thinking about their sister and wondering how she's doing, and is she going to be okay for a couple of minutes. And all of a sudden, she's missed what teacher was saying in math class. And at that point, it's hard to regroup for them. So you'll see those grades dropping because little things might catch their attention that remind them of what's going on, and they simply just don't know what to do with that in the moment. Another major sign is changes in sleeping or eating habits. You may see the sibling who's still at home struggling to fall asleep when they didn't seem to have any problems before. Maybe they are waking up in the middle of the night more often, or they're having regular nightmares. Maybe they used to sleep in their own bed, but now all of a sudden they're wanting to sleep in your bed every single night, which is very out of character. With other children, you may see them eating more or eating less than usual. Eating is often used as a coping mechanism because it feels good and it feels comfortable. Or if their anxiety has gotten particularly high and they get that, that nervous, upset tummy, they may be eating less because they don't want to make themselves sick or their tummies just hurt too bad to eat anything. Most of the time, all of these things I'm going to talk about are a phase. They do not last for very long. But if they are happening for more than a couple of weeks, that is a sign that they are struggling, more than what you would typically expect. A little bit of this is going to be completely normal. But when it lasts longer than what you think it should, then you know there's more going on here. Another sign of struggle is when comfort never seems to be enough. You see this a lot with children that are struggling with anxiety, and when there's been a major life change, especially a sibling or a parent going through an illness, anxiety can definitely rise. Their stress level can get higher, and many times being comforted, it never seems to be enough, and sometimes it seems to make matters worse. And that's how you know, okay, my child is really struggling, because before, when I comforted them, it would help. They would calm down. They would take some of the advice that I would give them and they would use it, and it would work. But now, it's not working. Now, whenever you try to comfort them, they're crying harder, they're crying longer, and nothing seems to help. That is definitely a sign of struggle. Another sign is losing interest in previously enjoyed activities. If they used to love going to soccer practice and now all of a sudden they are perfectly happy to skip any chance they get. If they are not wanting to go to any more of their after-school activities and they just want to be at home, those are some signs that maybe they are really, really struggling. And then another one is isolating themselves from their friends. They used to want to hang out with them all the time, and now they don't want to go to the play date. They don't want to go to their friend's sleepover. They just want to be at home and be with their family. They are avoiding friends. These are signs that they are really, really struggling with what is going on. So the most important thing, though, is how can you, as a parent, help your children? How can you help them through this really, really difficult time? So the things that I'm going to go over may seem kind of impossible at times. So I want to preface all of this by saying the most important thing is that you do the best you can with the situation that you're in. None of this is going to be perfect, and there are always ways to work through it no matter what. So consistency is going to be key. So for example, in spite of all of the changes that you're going through, your schedule changing, the doctor visits, the being in and out of the house, spending nights in the hospital, then spending nights at home, you really want to try to stick to the rules of your house as much as possible. Children definitely feel more out of control if all of a sudden they can get away with things that they couldn't get away with before. I heard someone say once a long time ago that, good parenting is knowing when to stick to your guns and when to throw the rules out the window. So there are always going to be exceptions to this rule, but for the most part, you want to stick to your rules at home. You don't want to let them get away with anything all of a sudden, partially because maybe you feel guilty because you're not there as much. Stick to your guns, stick to your rules. They actually need that more than they need you to give in. And along that same line, keeping to your routine as much as possible. And again, this may seem absolutely impossible, but even just little things that are the same can be really, really helpful. Consistency absolutely equals stability and security in a child, and that typically leads to, calmer, more in control behavior, and they feel more relaxed and calm themselves. So for example, trying to keep bedtimes the same. Not letting them stay up an extra 30 minutes to an hour. Even if they're waiting for mom or dad to get home, they need to go to bed, and maybe mom and dad can come in at that hour and just check on them rather than letting them stay up until they get home. Keeping the homework routine the same. If the routine was you come home, you do your homework, and then you have playtime, stick with that as much as humanly possible. Some of these things, again, are going to feel a little bit impossible, but at the same time, the more you can do, the better. And if anything, it may be that your schedule has had to change completely, and you can't stick to what you had before. That's okay. You will find a new normal. And that new normal, that can be the consistency too, because children can adjust fairly quickly as long as there's something that is the same. And actually, school really, really helps with this as well, because school is a very consistent thing for a child. It's 5 days a week, starts at the same time, ends at the same time. That in and of itself helps a child feel secure and calm because they know what to expect. And the more they know what to expect, the more calmer they're going to feel. The next way for how to help is to really focus on validating all emotions. One thing that I tell every parent that I work with is that feelings are never wrong. Behaviors can be, but feelings are never wrong. It is okay for them to be angry. It's okay for them to be sad. It's okay for them to be scared. not okay for them to scream and yell or be disrespectful or run away from something. So validating their emotions, telling them, I can see that you're really mad right now, or you're really sad right now, and putting that out there to them, letting them know that it's okay. But also not being afraid to talk about your own emotions with your kids, because the way you process these experiences are really going to guide theirs. It's okay to let your kids know that you're sad, or that you're mad, or that you're scared. You may not give them all the details, but by sharing your emotions with them, you are giving them permission to feel the same thing, rather than them feeling like they have to ball it all up in order to be less of a burden. So all emotions are okay, even anger. When in doubt, start with acknowledging the emotion first. Always, always, always. And then probably one of the most important things to do throughout this entire process that you all are going through is to, as best you can, set aside some one-on-one time with each of your kids who are still at home, even if it's just 15 minutes at bedtime. And if you can't be available, have another trusted adult that can be available. Spend that one-on-one time with them, whether it's a grandparent, an aunt, an uncle, a coach they really, really love, a neighbor that they feel close to, someone that is there to give them that undivided one-on-one attention is going to be a really, really powerful healing tool for them, because then they feel like someone is seeing me, someone's noticing me, and they don't feel quite so alone in this process. And it's also really, really important to be honest and age appropriate with the information that you are going to share. You don't necessarily need to sugarcoat everything or hide everything from them, but obviously you want to be age appropriate as well. Younger kids are going to need less information, less detailed information, and they may, more than likely, they're not going to need it all at once. They're going to need little bits at a time. So don't feel like you have to sit your 5-year-old down and tell them everything about their brother or sister's cancer diagnosis in one conversation and tell them everything that's going to happen. If anything, you want to let them guide the conversation by asking questions and validating what they're feeling in the moment, because honestly, if you will focus on validating their fears and their confusion, you're actually going to get a lot more information than if you ask the question, what do you think? Do you have any questions? How you doing? As most of you probably know, when you ask a kid a question, you typically get a one-word answer. So making a statement, validating the emotion, you're going to get a whole lot more out of them than if you ask the question. So a couple of examples might be to tell your younger kids about the side effects that their brother or sister may experience, and that it may make them more tired or not feel good, so that they understand why their sibling can't play with them or why they're getting special treatment and they're not. That can be especially hard for younger children that are very focused on fairness and things being even. When they see their brother or sister who has the diagnosis getting, you know, extra screen time or extra ice cream because their throat is sore, or just extra time in general, they may not understand why can't they have those same things. And so really explain to them that there are side effects to this and helping them to understand that. And like I said, always, always, always allow for questions, but don't be afraid to say, I don't know. You do not have to have all the answers, and you can simply let them know that, validate that was a really good question and I don't know the answer, but as soon as I get it, I'll let you know. And most kids are going to be okay with that. They just want to feel heard and understood. They don't have to have all the information at once. And really be sure that you remind them repeatedly that cancer is no one's fault. So many kids think that when something bad happens, it must be someone's fault or their fault. Children are very black and white in their thinking. So if something bad happens to someone good, then they must have caused it, because that person's all good. They couldn't have caused this. But the bottom line is cancer is nobody's fault. It happens, and there's nothing we can do to change it. And so, but you may have to remind them of that several times. Children have very wild, vivid imaginations, and they will come up with all kinds of ideas as to where this comes from. There's a really great book called Was It the Chocolate Pudding? And it's actually a book about divorce and a child trying to figure out, well, did my parents get divorced because I spilled chocolate pudding everywhere? And the answer is no, of course not. That's not why that happened. But it could be the same thing with cancer. You know, did I play with my little sister too long outside? Or when we were playing doctor and I stuck the fake thermometer in her mouth, did I give her the germs? Did I sneeze on her and cause her to get sick? And of course, the answer is no to all those things. But they may have those thoughts, even if they don't share them. So make sure you tell them that it is no one's fault. And then lastly, for the how to help section, really make sure that as best you can, you set up regular family meetings to check in as a family unit, especially if you have kids that are, 5, 6, and up, because they are old enough to sit down and have a little short conversation. If anything, this is just an opportunity to keep your bonds really, really strong as a family, maybe play board games or color together. It allows the door to be open for questions. You talk about the needs that everyone has, including your own, and you're able to share any joys and sorrows that have happened in your life. With the busyness of a family schedule, even before cancer diagnosis, it can be really, really hard to sit down and stay connected as a family. So this is going to be paramount, of setting aside time for you as a family, you as a couple, and even the children together, making sure that everyone is in this together, and you see yourselves as a team. You are doing this together. So if there's any questions about that section, please don't hesitate to type in some questions, and we'll get to them here in just a few minutes. All right, so last but not least, I want to touch on a couple of ways that you can be proactive in helping the siblings and the children who are dealing with the diagnosis too, moving forward. Not all children show signs of struggle right away, and not all kids struggle either. The younger the children are, the more oblivious they might be, and therefore you may not see some of these things right away. But there are things you can do in advance to be proactive and keep these things from happening or make it less likely that they will happen. So the first one is really to surround yourself with a solid support system. That way, when you're occupied with your child who's in treatment, there is someone else already in place that is going to be there and present for the kids that are waiting at home. This can be teachers, school counselors, family members. Surround yourself with as many people as possible. And don't hesitate to tell the school what your child is going through. They can't help what they don't know. So if they know that their brother or sister is going through cancer treatments, they may stop and kind of just check in and touch base with the kids who are still in school. And then those kids know they've got some support. They have people that they can go and talk to. So really surround yourself with a solid support system as quickly as possible. The next one, and this may seem kind of obvious, but you really want to just cuddle and hug your kids as often as possible. Children are very physical beings most of the time. They need that touch. They need that connection. And if you've got younger children, infants or toddlers, they are going to really, really respond to that physical touch and that calming. Children learn to self-regulate through their parents. So it goes back to when they were infants, and when baby cries, if mommy stays calm, baby calms down a lot faster. Whereas if, toddler falls down at the park and mom freaks out to go get him, he's going to scream a whole lot louder. So we have to snuggle and cuddle our kids often and be that kind of soothing force around them to help them learn how to self-regulate in these moments. So don't forget to grab onto them as often as you can. And as I mentioned earlier, keep the conversation going. Check back in with all of your kids regularly, even if things seem to be going smoothly. And this really goes for kids of all ages. Younger kids, older kids, teenagers, older kids especially, as I mentioned at the beginning, they may pull back and withdraw a little bit because they don't want to create more issues. But as a result, they may act like everything's fine, but everything may not be fine. So even if they look like they're doing great, check back in with them, keep the conversation going, open the door for questions so that they know they can speak up if they need to. Now, as a play therapist, of course, I'm always going to promote the idea of play because children do process through play. So with your younger kids who maybe aren't as verbal just yet, you need to be playing with them. Get on the floor, be on their level, and follow their lead. Don't necessarily, guide them in their play, but let them pick. Let them choose what they want to do and follow along with them. It's kind of like they are the director and you're the actor. You're kind of following their lead and doing what you're told and letting them guide the whole process. And you'll probably be pretty amazed at what you see. And when you're doing this, make sure that they have your undivided attention. So leave the cell phones in a different room. Turn off the to-do list in your head. really give them, 20 to 30 minutes of uninterrupted just playtime. And you'll be amazed at how much that will fill their bucket and what you will see and how you'll be able to connect with them. Utilize choices whenever possible. For children, they often feel like they do not have much control over their world. And so by giving them choices, you are giving them a sense of healthy control over their circumstances, but it is still within mommy and daddy perimeters because you're the one giving them the choices. So you still are, you're in total control, you're in ultimate control, but they feel like they have control over their life a lot more. And when children feel in control, their behavior is in control, they feel calmer, they feel more competent to do what they need to do. And then last but not least, really try to keep them in as many of their regular activities as possible. Remind them that it is okay to have fun. Even though there's these horrible things going on at home and they don't know what to do and they're scared, it is still okay to laugh. It's still okay to have fun. It's still okay for them to want to do those fun things. They don't have to just sit at home and be miserable. That is not the way the world works. We want them to be kids and enjoy being kids and do the best they can and go to school, have fun, play, and that's going to get them through these really, really difficult times. So that is all I have for today. We're going to look at the questions now, so we'll read them out loud and go from there.
So as Erin said, this kind of concludes the webinar learning piece. If you are viewing the webinar from a computer, you can ask your question by typing it into the Ask tab of your Q&A panel located on the bottom right. The questions will be viewed by all the attendees unless you change the recipient to host on your Ask tab. And if you're viewing this webinar from a mobile device, you can ask by tapping you can ask a question by tapping on the three dots at the bottom of your application, and then choose Q&A and type your question. So we are just going to pause here for a minute to allow for any questions, and we'll move forward.
Okay, so the first question is, what are some of your favorite books to support sibling coping? In general, I always just point to my favorite parenting books in general, and one of my all-time favorites is called How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk. The authors, I believe, are Faber and Maslish. This is my favorite book of all time. It's a bright yellow book, and to me, I feel like it's worth its weight in gold. It will talk a lot about how to talk to your kids in such a way that you will get feedback back from them, and so they will listen to you, and so it just helps keep the conversation going. It talks a lot about how to validate their emotions, and it's also very, very practical because the book is not just, read it from beginning to end. It is, there's a lot of application things throughout the book you can write in the book. There's like role plays you can do in the book, so it's really, really user-friendly, and it's one of my absolute favorites.
Thanks, Erin.
You're welcome.
So this concludes our webinar on helping elementary-age children cope with the siblings cancer diagnosis. This webinar will be housed on the CURE website at www.curechildhoodcancer.org for future reference, and we look forward to continuing to support you on your journey with childhood cancer. Thanks all.